Because they weren't in the office full time, their colleagues who were in the office full time were more likely to get those career development opportunities. If teams can't be co-located in the office together, then there's no point to them being in the office. And people said this to me time and time again. There is no point to the office if I can't be sitting with people and if my team is not in there together. Everyone just wants to know, what is the hybrid model that works? And the reality of it is,
welcome to the People Managing People podcast. We're on a mission to build a better world of work and to help you create happy, healthy, and productive workplaces. I'm your host, David Rice. My guest today is Lynette Caruso. She is a doctor of philosophy at the Australian National University, and she has been conducting research on hybrid work. We're going to be talking about what she learned from that research and what lessons HR leaders can apply. Lynette, welcome.
thank you. Lovely to be here.
So I want to start with something that sounds kind of simple, but maybe is not that simple, right? So you interviewed people across government and private sectors. What surprises you most about how different organizations approach hybrid work?
Yeah. So I interviewed three different organizations. I interviewed an organization that had implemented a 50% attendance policy. So that's where they were required to attend 50% per month in the office. And then I interviewed two public service organisations, one that had an if not, why not policy, and a third organisation that had a case by case policy. So, if not, why not, is kind of like, well, let's see how we can make this happen for you. And case by case was look at each individual person's circumstances and see whether or not we can actually accommodate flexible work. So it really starts from those approaches. So what really surprises me is the change management approach that those organizations then took. So they either had a people focused mentality or a business focused mentality. So the 50% organization really had a business focused mentality. It was really saying, we've looked at our data. Our data says collaboration, connection, engagement, etc., is increases when people are in the office 50% of the time. And so they went down this path of this 50% in office per month. Whereas the case by case organization took very much a people focused mentality. And that looked at engaging the whole organization in determining what the values of the organization should be, and then implementing those values in hybrid work. And so then that really cascades down to how hybrid work is implemented in those organizations. And whether or not you then have a focus on compliance, as occurs in the 50% organization, of meeting the 50% requirement, or you have a focus on how can we fit work around your life. So that's probably the biggest thing that surprised me, was their change management approach, which then led to this cultural change within the organizations.
It's fascinating. Oh, as we kind of dig into this, I was looking at some what we talked about beforehand, and you were saying how relationships are key to hybrid success. Why do you believe casual moments like coffee chats have such a big impact on long-term performance?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I never could have predicted how important having a coffee was going to be, but it came up so much, and in my research, I couldn't possibly tell you. But really, what's happening in these coffee chats is a bit like when a journalist interviews a subject, maybe like even me today. They're only asking those questions around, who are you? So, what are you married? Are you single? Do you have a partner? Do you have children? Do you like sports? Do you like movies of particular kind? What do you like to watch on Netflix? This is a big thing, obviously. Books, etc. So what they're trying to find out is, do we have things in common? And then whether when you discover that you have things in common, it tends to make people like each other a little bit more. So that's really important. What they're also doing is looking at, when a person might be available. So they're finding out, are they in the office, 3 days a week, 2 days a week? And this changes from week to week according to, people's individual circumstances. And also they're trying to find out, what do they know? What's their expertise? What can I ask this person about? And that also changes from day to day, depending on if people have, gone off to a training, etc., or they've been involved in a particular work task that's increased their knowledge in a particular area. And they're also trying to find out when is the best time to contact people. You might have people who prefer to, be contacted in the morning. They're a morning person. You might have people who prefer to be contacted in the, in the afternoon. They don't get going until they've had that morning coffee. Um, so there's all these different things that they're learning about people, including how they prefer to communicate. So, do they prefer to be contacted via Teams messages? Do they prefer to be called? So they're trying to learn all of this information and it changes. Hence why the ongoing coughing chats are really important. Because this week I might be feeling sick. And so I'm going to be online now only 2 days. I'm only gonna come into the office 1 day a week, and I'm not gonna come in 2. So it changes. Everything's changing in terms of my knowledge, where I am, those sorts of things. So those informal conversations are critical to the team understanding who they can go to for a problem, when they can go to them, so understanding if someone's struggling, etc., um, and the types of questions that they can ask. It also helps to build in buy-in. So it means that if I've got a relationship with you, we like the same things on Netflix, when we like the same sports, whatever it is, um, you're more inclined to help me, and I'm more inclined to help you. So often kind of coffee is poo-pooed a bit and gone, oh, they're just wasting time. They're going out for a coffee. Here they go again. They're going out for a coffee. And in fact, I think it was one organization, I can't remember, it might be Amazon. I can't remember. There's an organization that was looking at having their coffee in the office so that people were basically bound there. They weren't going anywhere. But actually, you need people to be going somewhere. It's the walk on the way to the coffee that is an informal opportunity to have these sorts of conversations. So those relationships, those coffee chats are critical to teams being able to function. They carry those relationships from in-person coffee chats to online. Yeah.
Okay. That's I mean, it makes sense. That's what we're all I think that what we're seeing from the research now, right, is that people are, especially younger professionals, are craving that sort of connection, on a regular basis, and I guess it does really make a difference.
1,000% it does. Yeah.
So, and as we were chatting before this, you said to me that, policies are only effective as the cultures that support them. So I was curious, did you have an example where a flexible sounding policy failed due to a mismatched culture?
Yeah. I mean, I've been really lucky in a way with the organizations that I've interviewed because I've got the whole spectrum of flexibility. So, with the first organization with a 50%, a lot less flexibility. Middle organization with an if not, why not? Sounds flexible, but the culture was not. And then the third organization, which had a case by case, which was a very flexible organization. So the one that sounds flexible but isn't really flexible is really, if not, why not? And so what happened there in, as I mentioned earlier, the if not, why not culture was really about, or policy was really about saying, we should make this happen for you. And if we can't make it happen, why can't we make it happen? However, the senior executives at the most senior level in the organization had a view that being in the office was much better. And being full time in the office was much better. So then this kind of attitude and culture cascades right down throughout the whole organization. So this meant then that the next layer down of senior executives were not role modeling hybrid. They weren't working hybrid because they understood the message from their senior manager that, really full time in the office was the better way to go. And then what happens then is those senior executives are signaling then to the next level down of managers that it's really not okay to be working hybrid. So there's an expectation then that there will be someone from each team in the office every day. And managers felt this pressure and expectation. So they were caught in the middle there. So your middle level managers are really caught in the middle with this tension between senior executive wanting people in the office and their staff who were wanting greater flexibility and who by all accounts, the policy said, if not, why not? I should be able to work from home. Why can't I? So they were caught in the middle here. And where they could, they tried to accommodate the flexibility of that policy and tried to meet their staff's, working from home needs. And staff, on the whole, generally didn't notice this. So team members themselves didn't generally notice this mismatch until they kind of butted up against that tolerance, where that extreme tolerance was for the organization. So, really, when it moved to more than 2 days working from home, staff began to feel this kind of mismatch between the culture and the policy, where the organisation really didn't want you to be working from home more than 2 days a week. It also had career development implications. So, one manager spoke to me about the fact that because they weren't in the office full time, their colleagues who were in the office full time were more likely to get those career development opportunities. When they by chance did have that opportunity to act at a different level, what would happen is their senior management would say to them, "Oh, we've got that meeting coming up on Friday. You are going to be here for that, aren't you?" So there were these informal kind of signaling messages given to them about it's important to be in the office. You can't do this from home. So that's how that kind of mismatch between policy that sounds great, if not, why not, doesn't match the culture of a senior executive that then says, actually, I prefer people being in the office. And that cascades all the way down to the teams feeling that as well and not being able to access the full amount of flexibility that's available.
Yeah, it just sounds like a recipe for ambiguity to me, right? Because, like, what qualifies for why not? You know?
Satisfaction, right? You're just satisfied because you can't access what you think you should be able to access. So yeah, if you're looking at engagement, HR personnel who audits is interested in implications for HR. If you're looking at engagements as a key factor, people are not going to be engaged if you have this disconnect between policy and culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you studied teams environments where, yeah, obviously there was different attendance expectations. You had mentioned 50% minimum in office, then there's the case by case. Mike, what I'm curious about is how does those frameworks sort of shape team dynamics?
Yeah, it's fascinating, really. So, like I said, it's kind of dependent on your change management strategy and whether you focused on those values or whether you focused on compliance with the 50%. So, if we take the 50% organization, for example, the original decision was based on increasing connection and collaboration in the office. But as it rolled out, it really didn't focus, its communication was not focused on that. Its communication was focused on compliance. So it went from announcing this policy straight to compliance with the 50% per month attendance. So, and people were able, by the way, to come in whenever they wanted on that 50%. So, provided they made 50% in the month, they could come in whenever they wanted. It was flexible. The organisation encouraged a team day or a glue day or an anchor day, so when everyone came in together, but it was not mandatory or compulsory. So, what you then saw was people in the organisation, in those teams, perhaps coming in for the first 2 weeks of the month and not coming in for the second 2 weeks of the month. So, missing that whole connection piece altogether. They weren't actually connecting in the office because they were focused just on meeting their 50% compliance. Or they'd come in and they'd sit in the corner because they had KPIs they needed to meet. So, if they were chatting with people in the office, then perhaps they wouldn't meet their KPI. So they thought, better I sit in the corner and not chat to people. Or they might actually not come in on the same days that their team was in. And in actual fact, the private entity saw an uptick in sick days on days when the team was scheduled to be in together. So the difference of having that kind of a 50% minimum office attendance with a focus on compliance means teams are not really focused on connecting. Another example related to that is where then the manager decided, okay, well, I've got to also make sure that my team is coming in this 50% of the time, or I'm going to be penalized, right? Because the organization was beginning to implement a policy where people's bonuses were affected if they were not coming in 50% of the time. So then a manager decide, well, I'm going to make my team come in 60% of the time, right? Because 50% is a bit tricky. Like there's not 50% in a week. We've got a 5-day week. How do you do 50%, right? It's actually 2.5 days. You've got to do two one day, 2 days, 1 week, three the next week. So, but if I just make my whole team come in 3 days each week, then I know that we're going to meet the 50% requirement. In fact, we'll exceed it. But what happened then is the team morale completely reduced, and their engagement with the organization reduced. And all they could talk about was how unfair it was for them to have to come in this 60% of the time. So that's how having this focus on 50% minimum office attendance can impact team dynamics. People are not coming in together, they're avoiding each other, or you have managers who are overcommitting to that 50% policy. And you contrast that with an organization that had a case by case kind of a policy, which was really looking at individual circumstances and how can we meet those individual needs as well as the team needs and the organizational needs. So it didn't just say, let's make this work for the individual. It also said, let's make this work for the individual team and organization. What happened then is you had lots of people with different arrangements, but the team was supportive of those different arrangements. So people were doing a myriad of different things. They were going to ballet in the middle of the day. They were going to play sport in the middle of the day. They were able to go drop off their kids or pick their kids up at the end of the day. And all of that was supported by the team because everyone was accessing different arrangements or understood the benefit of these different arrangements for people. There were those discussions at that team level. It also then changed the individual mindset of people. So individuals themselves started to think, yeah, I really want that person to be able to do what they want to do because I want to do what I want to be able to do. And hybrid really became normalized. There wasn't this expectation that everyone had to be in the office every day. So you can see how different policies really trickle down to impacting on team dynamics.
So fascinating. I find it really interesting, sort of how just like one little change can make
Yeah.
such a big difference,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, it's like a domino effect, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah. So if
No,
the HR
sorry.
person doesn't think their work is important or doesn't feel they're getting any traction, it makes a tremendous amount of difference. That change management approach of changing the values cascaded all the way down, makes a huge difference. Yeah.
One of the trends we see around, especially hybrid work, right, is hot desking, things like, people messing with sort of the modern office layout. And I'm curious if you think from your research, do you feel that those are hurting or helping the hybrid experience?
Yeah, I mean, in short, yes. So I had lots of my participants talk to me about the impact of hot desking. Now, hot desking is attractive to organizations, right? Because they're trying to reduce their footprint. One of the things about hybrid work, they thought, oh, this is great. We're going to be able to reduce our footprint, reduce some of our costs here, save some money. But in actual fact, what's happening is if teams can't be co located in the office together, then there's no point to them being in the office. And people said this to me time and time again. There is no point to the office if I can't be sitting with people and if my team is not in there together. And the reason for that is you miss out on those incidental conversations. So I can't turn around and just say, hey, I've got this question. Can you just help me with this? So those sort of incidental questions, you're missing out on those. You also can't tell then if somebody's struggling. So I can see if somebody's got their head in their hands, or they might be huffing and puffing a little bit, or, you see that they're upset. You can approach them. You can check in on their well-being. But if you're not sitting together, you don't have the opportunity to do that. You can also overhear conversations. So, two of your colleagues are having a conversation about a piece of work. You might have something that you can contribute to that conversation. And so that helps them with their work because you might come up with an idea that they never thought of. Or you might store that information for later and go, oh, note to self, something for me to remember when I've got a similar problem later on. So co-location makes a big difference to people. So when you start hot desking and people can't actually be teams, can't be co-located together, you're impacting how the team functions, how it collaborates, how it communicates, and also its team cohesion and how it looks after its fellow members. Also, some of the organizations had a booking system, so teams could book desks together. But what was happening is one manager was actually staying up until midnight to book the team system. I mean, that's dedication and commitment for you, staying up until midnight to be able to book the team in together so they were able to sit together. Or another team had a booking roster. So each person had, their turn at actually booking the team together, booking seats together. But what happens is this is an additional cognitive load. It's an additional task that teams are required to do. So it's an extra piece of work for them, and they feel that. Also, hot desking can reduce flexibility. So let's say you've reduced your footprint, you only now have a certain number of desks available. And that might mean that when I need to change my days because something's happened and I've got an appointment, or I want to come in because there's really urgent, important meeting that's really done better face to face, it's difficult for me to change those days because there's no desk available. So it actually reduces flexibility. And that's something I think organizations haven't really considered. The other thing is because of that reduced footprint, you might be actually encouraging more work from home because I can't come in because there's no desks available. So, and there are some people who really prefer to be in the office. There are people who prefer to keep work and home separate. And so they like to be in the office more. But the opportunity for them to be in the office more is reduced without the availability of desks. Conversely, there are some people who are deciding to stay and work full time in the office because it means that they will have a desk allocated to them full time. So, hot desking creates a whole lot of, unexpected consequences in how teams function and also in how hybrid work functions as well.
Yeah, I've heard a few stories of it not being done in a very, like, intentional way, and it's sort of like, so now I have no desk, I have no idea who I'm gonna sit next to, and I have like, I'm not sure why I
Yeah.
came in, It almost, like, defeats the whole purpose of why you thought you were gonna come back in, so
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there is some benefit, like if you're sitting next to somebody in your kind of broader work group, there's some benefit of we're networking with that person, absolutely. But in
yeah.
terms of on an ongoing basis, the benefits of being co-located with your team far outweigh that networking opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Now, you took a systems level approach in your research, from the individual all the way to societal forces. How does government policy or public discourse sort of impact the hybrid workplace?
Yeah. So, look, one of the biggest things that people mentioned to me was commuting. And in fact, a lot of people indicated if they had a shorter commute, probably would go into the office more. So it's not that people don't necessarily like the office environment. They definitely like the work life balance, by the way. But the commute is a really big issue for people. So, where they have a long commute, this really impacts their ability to attend the office. And commuting is really a transport infrastructure policy, right? So, this is where governments can actually influence hybrid work. So if you had a better transport infrastructure, that will probably impact how often people attended the office. It would also impact people's resistance or reluctance to attend the office because it means that they can get home a lot quicker, which is what people are really wanting out of hybrid work, right? So they're wanting more of that home time to themselves to be able to either spend with their children, participate in other recreational activities, or just some downtime. So, if governments actually invested in infrastructure, transport infrastructure, this would make a huge difference. One of the other things that people spoke to me about was childcare. So, here in Australia, governments dictate childcare policy. And so, people were only able to get childcare 3 days in a row. So, if I can only get childcare 3 days in a row, and let's say I'm working part time, I get my childcare on Monday and Tuesday and you get your childcare on Thursday and Friday. our ability to actually go in the office to meet and work as a team is significantly reduced. So, this is where this kind of broader government policy really impacts how hybrid teams function. And I don't think anyone's really thought about it at this level previously. There's also kind of and I think there may have been a similar thing happen in the States as well, but certainly here in Australia, there's been a push to revive cities, right? We call them central business districts. I think you might call
Mhm.
them downtowns. I'm not
Yeah.
quite sure. Um, but there's been a push to really revive those. Businesses have been declining and we want more people in the office. And certainly private entities have felt that push. Whether it's impacted their decision making, jury's still out. But certainly they've felt that push. Um, Other kinds of policies that impact is the right to disconnect. So, certainly in different countries around the world, France was the first to implement, a right to disconnect, and here in Australia, we've implemented that recently. So this means, that you have a right that, after work hours, you don't need to respond to those messages on your phone that you might be receiving, if you've got Teams on your phone or if you've got email on your phone, etc. Because what happened with COVID is we really became contactable 24/7. And so the government introducing a right to disconnect policy helps people to maintain that work life balance and to help draw that line in their teams to say, no, it's not okay to be contacting me after hours. I'm now going to, now going to be having family time. Or to be able to set those rules within the team about when it is okay and not okay. So, yeah. So there's some of the things at a government policy level. In terms of the public discourse, not quite on discourse, but an interesting thing that was raised with me that I had never ever considered was the impact of social media on hybrid teams. And I would never have considered this, an issue, but one person raised, or a couple of people raised with me, how the increase in the use of social media in society impacts how people communicate in hybrid teams. So in social media, we've seen a lot of trolling, people saying not very nice things about each other on social media. And often people do that because they're not having those coffee chats, right? They don't have those personal connections. They don't really know those people. So they feel it's okay to not be nice to people you don't know. And so when people are participating online, they also might feel it's okay to be a little bit harsher when conflict arises, to express their views a little bit more pointedly because you're in this kind of a forum and you don't really have that personal connection with that person. So it's even more of an issue where you have a fully remote team as opposed to a hybrid team who has some degree of personal connection. So really interesting kind of finding, I think, around how changes in society impact how also teams operate.
It's fascinating. Yeah, you brought up a lot of stuff there. I mean, the central business district stuff. I know, like San Francisco has done a little bit of work behind that. I think it's really about creating partnerships. If you can get that and sort of create these mutually beneficial relationships, then it's possible. Um, but there was there was something else there. I can't remember what it was now, but but
Excellent.
no, I agree. I agree with what you're saying though. Like it's and I think we're seeing even when you look at it like on LinkedIn, right? The discourse around remote versus in office versus hybrid. It's people do sort of have these like really strong opinions and say things to each other that I'm like, you wouldn't say that if you were in the
Yeah.
office with her, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, it's
It's
fascinating.
interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. And it's really that personal connection. I don't feel as though we've got anything in common. So it's okay for me to say these things. And I'm not seeing you face to face. I don't have the same social expectations for me to behave nicely. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you said successful hybrid environments, it requires every layer of the org to be aligned on flexibility, whether it's managers, team members, all the way up to executives. I'm curious, where do breakdowns most often happen?
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, it's at the manager level, you know? So, really, and in saying that, it starts from the top, right? So, you need to have those senior executives on board. But on a day to day basis, it's those managers of the teams that really make hybrid work or break it, really. So they need to be role modeling hybrid in the first instance because that signals to their team that it's okay to work hybrid and you can do it effectively. Because look at me, I'm in a managerial position and I can make it work. So, first of all, they need to be role modeling it. Secondly, they need to be fostering collaboration. And they can do this in a number of ways. So, they can do it by creating subgroups. Now, subgroups are often a bit of an issue in teams. So sometimes you often hear in the, Teams literature that subgroups are bad because you get some people kind of in a little bit of a clique and they only communicate with those groups and they're not communicating with the whole team. And certainly that happened in my research. But where you use subgroups in a positive way, for example, in one of my organizations, I had a manager who allocated work to a subgroup. And so then that group works together for a period of time, and then she allocates the wish, and then that subgroup disbands, and they work together with a different subgroup. And that helps people to get to know each other. It also helps them to work together, to support each other, to want to help each other. So they learn to collaborate. Also, if the manager pitches in when it's busy, that also demonstrates collaboration. They go, oh, the manager's helping out, then, oh, I should help out too, because it's not okay for me to not help out then. So, kind of people in a way, I guess, are not shamed into it, but understand that there's this expectation in the team to collaborate. They also are really are really key at fostering team cohesion. And the way that they do that, coffee, right? Social events. Let's all go for coffee. Let's go for lunch. Let's have morning tea to celebrate that particular achievement. So they are pivotal in signaling that it is okay to have these social events. These social events are critical to helping us to work together as a team. So really important that they, foster that team cohesion and also communication. Communication is probably the most critical thing for teams at the manager level and for team members themselves. So they need to be fostering that open communication by including everyone in the conversation, regardless of where they are. So if somebody happens to be working from home, then making sure that you dial them into that conversation if you're in the office. If it was a non-work day for them, make sure that you share the information for them. And then as you do this and you're role modeling sharing information, it then signals to the rest of the team that they should do the same thing. So you're lightening your workload because then the team will also do this for you. They understand that if they were in a meeting, they need to share that information with the person who perhaps missed out. So, really important. They also need to understand, how do I communicate? Like, do I use Teams for this particular thing? Do I use a Teams message for this particular message I want to convey? Should I get everyone together in a Teams call? Shall I wait for the office for this? Like if it's an issue where there might be contention in the team, like there's a little bit of conflict, maybe it's better to do that in the office. So managers really need to understand what method of communication they use when. They also need to regularly check in with people. I can't tell you how many times people said to me, I want to hear from my manager. So, how often they want to hear from their manager and how they want to hear from them is different for different people. So, managers need to understand the individual communication preferences of their team members, but they do want to hear from them. And it might be for some teams that just putting in a Teams message, hi, how is everyone? I'm here if you need anything, right? So, for some teams, that might be enough. For other teams, you might need to check in with individuals or check in with some individuals. So that is critical to ensuring a team well-being, to ensuring that people are not overloaded so that you can then reallocate work if you need to. Managers are also key at setting expectations. So they need to say how often they expect people to be in the office, how they expect the team to communicate, how they expect the team to collaborate, and also make it okay for team members to speak up when they see something that's perhaps not working all right. And a really good way to do this is to develop some kind of a team charter or team agreement where the team works together to discuss how they want to do these things, how often they think they need to be in the office to get their work done, how they want to communicate, how they want to collaborate, all of those sorts of things. So, really, the key to hybrid work is managers, but I say that knowing that you have to have that organizational culture in place to support managers to work in this way.
I guess my final question to you would be if there's one myth you wish you could bust about hybrid work, what would it be and what truth did your findings reveal instead?
Yeah, I think everyone would like just a simple solution of like, what is the hybrid model that works, right? Everyone just wants to know what is it? How many days is it? Where is that sweet spot? How many days should we be in the office? That's what everybody wants to know. And the reality of it is there is no one size fits all model. It's truly dependent on your particular team. So the specific needs of the team in terms of how interdependent their work is, like and what I mean by that is how much of my work is dependent on you, how much we need to collaborate or not collaborate to get the work done. How long have we been working together as a team? So, when you've got established patterns and norms in place around communication and collaboration, maybe you don't need to be in the office as often. And also, each individual team member's needs, dictates how often the team might need to be together or are able to be together in the office. For example, childcare. So, having said all of that, that there is no one size fits all model, I would still suggest that all teams, regardless of how long they've been working together or how interdependent their work is, still benefit from having at least one day in the office together. Two is great, but at least one day in the office a week.
All right. Well, thank you for giving me a little bit of your time today. I really appreciate it. Before we go, there's a couple things that we always do here. The first is I want to give you a chance to tell people more about where they can connect with you, follow your research, find out more about what you're doing.
Yeah. So people can follow me on LinkedIn under my name, Lynette Caruso, and you'll find me as a Sir Roland Wilson scholar undertaking a PhD on hybrid work research. Yeah.
Excellent. And the last thing is we have a little tradition here on the podcast where you get to ask me a question. So I want to turn it over to you and you can ask me anything.
Sure. Great. Okay. I know you mentioned to me that you actually work fully remote. So
I
I
do.
was wondering if you could change one thing about working fully remote. What is it you would change, if anything?
Uh, that's a good question. I really do like working remotely. Well, and I gotta give my current organization credit. They're actually pretty good about this, but I've worked at other places that are terrible about it. And it's just consistency on the tool stack. You work with one team, they've got this set of tools. You work in another team, they've got a completely different project management tool. They use this other tool. You got to learn all these different things. And you're like, if we were in an office, there's no way that this is how this would work. You know what I mean? They would just everything would be more standardized, and I think that is that and sort of like the documentation practices. And again, the current organization I work with is pretty good at this. Maybe could be a little better, but overall, like the best I've experienced. But one of the nightmares with like previous orgs was just there was never any documentation for anything. If you were trying to find something, it was really difficult because we didn't have like a sort of intranet of sorts, really. It was just like an ADP, there wasn't much in it, And so, yeah, I guess that those would be the things I don't know. So there wouldn't be things that would change currently because I think that in my current situation, it's really not too bad. But for a lot of organizations, I think those are areas that need to develop in order for remote work to be a better experience. So,
Mm, yeah. Yeah. No, and certainly my participants spoke a lot about technology and the importance of reliable technology and a suite of tools that helps you to be able to collaborate online. So, yeah, they're all consistent with points raised by my participants. So, yeah, not surprised.
well, Lynette, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a really good conversation. I think there was a lot of valuable bits in there for the audience, so I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right. Well, audience, if you haven't done so already, head on over to peoplemanagingpeople.com/subscribe. Get signed up for the newsletter. You'll get this podcast. You'll get all our upcoming events, a lot of other newsletters we're creating coming straight to your inbox. So get signed up. Until next time, keep working on your hybrid work.